Oh, God. Ow, what the hell happened there? Ladies and gentlemen, it is deja vu time in the graphics card world, because ladies and gentlemen, it is deja vu time in the graphics card world, because today we have the new RTX 4080 Super, and we're not actually expecting this to be radically different to the RTX 4080 that it replaces, but the big news is this is now a whole lot cheaper. This is actually the price it probably should have been at launch, starting at $999, and this is pretty good as well, because it means if you are in the market for a 4080, you can probably find an older card in the sale, maybe under the £1,000 mark, and it would still be worth picking up. But today we're going to be putting together a pretty awesome high-end 4K gaming PC with some of my favorite components that we've assembled, or I suppose gathered, over the last few years. We're going to put it all together, we're going to show you everything that's good, maybe some things that don't quite work together, and then of course we're going to show you those all-important gameplay benchmark numbers so you can see exactly how well this thing performs, whether the RTX 4080 Super is actually worth your money. So let's get our build on right after a short word from this video's sponsor. NZXT's H6 Flow is here, throwing a whole new angle on PC gaming. This airflow orientated chassis fuses the beauty of wraparound glass with the performance of ventilation, thanks to 3 angled side-mounted fans fitted as standard, an expansion room at the top, rear and bottom. It is super easy to build in too, thanks to its dual chamber design, tool-free access and cable management straps. Get yours today with the link down below. Let us kick off this build by actually taking a closer look at our graphics card then, the 4080 Super. And obviously you can buy different variations. This is the 4080 from Palette, this is the Gaming Pro. Come on then, here we go. Let's get it under our overhead and actually take a look what we have on offer. And it definitely seems to be quite big, but this being the Gaming Pro, compared to some of the others you can get, especially the Founders Edition card, actually it's relatively small and lightweight, if you can believe it. I mean, we're still talking about a triple slot graphics card here, and one that is still quite long, so you're going to need a large case to actually fit this inside. But actually, assuming you can get it for a decent price, there's actually quite a lot to like here. Oh, okay. That's interesting. So you get an addressable RGB cable in the box. Not so interesting. But look at this. We have the PCI Gen 5 adapter, but it's only a 2-way. I'm pretty confident that the older card actually came with a 3-way splitter. So I guess this card is more efficient than the old one that it's replacing. But that actually is going to make a lot of people's rigs look a whole lot cleaner. I mean, for reference, by the way, here is the RTX 4080 that it's replacing. And I think you see what I mean about the overall heft. This is still a big card, but it just doesn't look or feel anywhere near as weighty as the Founders Edition. I mean, it'd be interesting to see actually with the 4080 Super Founders Edition whether they are going to be readily available, but don't forget that MSI are actually selling their new Expert card that is kind of like a Founders Edition in disguise. That's pretty cool. But at the time of filming, I have no idea how much that is, and again, just how available that will be. But I say let's pop this to one side, because we won't be needing this until we get a little bit further in, and we can actually start our build off with the motherboard. This is one from ASUS STRIX. This is actually an X670E motherboard, which I know a lot of people will say, why do you need that for gaming? It's overkill. And yes, you're absolutely right. A lot of people, or most people, would actually recommend that they go for the B650 version of this, but there's not actually like a crazy difference in price if you're looking to sort of do this sort of caliber of high-end build. I think you can get the B650E for around about £280. At the time of filming, this is about 340. So it's not, as I say, it's definitely more, but it's not crazy different, and it will give you more PCI Generation 5 support to make your board last a little bit longer. But let's pop this on top of our motherboard box. And then we can, of course, proceed to the Ryzen CPU that we're using. Obviously, this is AM5. You're going to need DDR5 and one of these newer generation CPUs. And this is probably the one you expected us to go for. This is the Ryzen 7 7800X3D, pretty much the best gaming CPU you can get. I mean, it does trade blows with like the top end i9s from Intel, but those use way more power and are more expensive. And while this is only an 8-core CPU, for gaming, this is absolutely the sweet spot when it comes to high-end performance. I mean, there's not like crazy differences between something like the Ryzen 7700, especially in 4K if you want to save a little bit of money. But frankly, if you are spending this sort of money on a gaming PC, then I'd say the 7800X3D is going to be your best bet. So let's proceed to pop open our slot, grab our Ryzen CPU, and then gently, of course, with no force, just lay this on top of those pins, give it a tiny little wiggle to make sure it's in, and then you can secure this into place. Next up, we're going to take this opportunity to install our SSD. This is one from Kingston. It's the KC3000, one of the fastest Gen 4 drives you can get. I mean, Gen 5 is starting to become a bit more appealing now, as you can buy really fast SSDs that don't have crazy big heat sinks to actually run at like their full performance. One of the ones I tested from AData had like this ridiculous tiny little fan on it, and it just defeated the whole point of having fast speeds. When you could actively hear your SSD over everything, it was ridiculous. Whereas, yeah, you can get ones now that are a lot more power efficient, which is good, but they're still very expensive. So for now, unless you can get one on sale, I would recommend just sticking with a Gen 4 drive like we have here. It's worth noting that this motherboard does actually have a double-sided heatsink, which is good, so it should dissipate that heat on larger capacity SSDs a lot easier. But just line that up and secure it down. Then you can press on to your memory or your RAM, and this is a kit from G-Skill. It is the Trident Z5 RGB, but this is actually one of the first kits I've used that's an AMD Expo kit that is rated over 6,000 megahertz. So this is 6,400 mega transfers a second, but because it supports AMD Expo, in theory, you should run into less potential issues when it comes to actually overclocking your RAM to get it to run at this speed by enabling the Expo profile in the motherboard BIOS. Remember that you want to use slots 2 and 4. You just line it up, give it a good push home till it's completely pressed, repeating, of course, until both sticks are in. I know it's boring, but good practice is to always tidy as you go. You don't want to make a mess because it will bite you in the bum later. But I would also recommend that you install your CPU cooling now, or at least have a look at what it is that you need to do. Because if you're going for an all-in-one, then chances are you might need to take this default AM5 mounting hardware off. On Intel, you'd have to put like a little back plate on the back here as well, and that's far easier to do all of this now before you put your board inside your rig. So the one that we're using here today is a little bit, I wouldn't say it's like crazy pricey, but it's definitely got a price premium. This is the Assassin 4 from Deepcool, and I want to go for like just a bit more of a minimal look here today, and this is such a nice case that sort of lends itself to a large air cooler. I thought this would make a whole lot of sense, and to be honest, the 7800X3D isn't even a chip that creates crazy amounts of power anyway. I mean, the most you're looking at really is about, what, 115 watts or so, which you compare to Intel, and it's like it is potentially half the power you're looking at on Intel, if not more.
This is why I need to put things away better.
If I can finally get this outside the box, then you should see what I mean about the overall design language of this. It's really nice and minimal. I think it's going to work perfectly actually with this chassis. It really does match the look, but this is also one that is very easy to install as well, and obviously supports both Intel and AMD without any issue. As I suspected, step 1 is to remove the default AM5 mounting hardware. Pop these off and to the side. Then you can grab the AM5 mounting hardware out of the bag. You have these 4 little like screw spacer type things. These just go upside down onto the motherboard and screw into those holes that you've just opened up. Then you grab the AMD brackets. It does say on there CPU with a little arrow, so make sure that's facing towards the CPU. Secure it down with these little nuts. Then tighten with a screwdriver. It's always worth doing a little test fit, by the way, just to make sure that everything lines up and you don't have any clearance issues. Here we look good. So we can now do it for real. First by grabbing some thermal paste, doing a little line in the middle, and then maybe a dot either side. Remove this fan from the middle just by squeezing these little triggers. Then as before, just gently line this up with those holes. It's definitely easier said than done sometimes, but actually this is one of the easier large coolers that you can install. It didn't always used to be this way. The Assassin 3 was a bit more complicated. Just make sure it is nice and tight without over tightening it. Also really important, by the way, do make sure that the fan blades are actually facing the same orientation, or you're not really going to get any cooling whatsoever, right? And it is a little bit annoying with this Deepcool cooler because you can see the label on this blade and it's blowing that way. But then if you did the same there, then this would be blowing that way. So you've actually got to have the back of the Deepcool fan facing that way and then almost like the front facing you. I mean, to be fair, there is actually this little logo on the top of the fan that shows you which way it's blowing. So you can then put the top piece back on, plug in our fans to this little splitter, and then plug the CPU cable into this little grey header on the motherboard. And guys, I am very, very pleased to say that actually that is pretty much all of the work done, because we're not adding any extra radiators or fans or anything to this case now. We literally just have to drop this in. I mean, this is now quite a hefty unit. This is actually most of your gaming PC right here. Obviously the graphics card will slot in, but otherwise that is entirely ready to go into our chassis. And the one that we're using here today is a favorite, so much so that we've only used this on the channel once before, because this has been our benchmarking rig, but I wanted to do another build with it, so we've taken it apart. This is from Lian Li. This is the Lancool 216, and I think it's fair to say that the craze at the moment with cases is to have like a longer dual chamber design, have a load of fans here, have like more glass, but you know what? A lot of people don't want that, so Lian Li make actually a more affordable chassis as well. This one cost around about £110 or dollars or so. That is for pretty much everyone else, right? Anyone that just wants a really nice, good airflow system, but doesn't want something that's like crazy big, will take up loads of space on their desk. And it's also a little bit lighter as well, because obviously you don't have as much glass. But yeah, this comes in a variety of colors. This black finish is really nice and obviously will perfectly match what we have here today. You've also got an addressable RGB and a fan hub at the top here as well. If you do want to expand your fan options, swap them out to something else, should be a very easy upgrade. Cable management, as you can see, is great here. There's very little that I don't like about this case. I mean, you've got USB-C on the front, 2 USB-As. There really is not much to dislike about this chassis. It's highly recommended. So I guess let's see how quickly we can actually finish off this rig now. Pick up our motherboard. You can pick it up by the cooler, but always make sure you're sort of securing the board as well, just in case you haven't, I don't know, screwed it down entirely properly. But this just lowers down into position. Make sure all of those holes are lined up, and then the case will kind of like grab your motherboard. And you just need to add some screws to these little standoffs here to get it nice and secure. So indeed, just screw this down. Once you have secured it down, your rig will then get a lot heavier, and you will have something that is resembling this. And you now see what I mean about the styling of this cooler. It perfectly matches this case, even though it's a completely different manufacturer. Let's proceed to get all of our cables plugged in though, including our USB-C, our USB Type 3. Our front panel is a single block down the bottom, which is useful, just there. We've got an addressable RGB for all of the case lighting. It's this little white one here. Next to that, we've then got a fan header for all of our case fans. Don't forget, of course, that we're using like a split around the back, so you just need one signal from your motherboard that can then be sort of split and rerouted to all of the ones on your case. And then I think last, but certainly not least, we have this one called HD Audio that's all the way at the bottom left. And this is the one that is, of course, going to do all of your analog audio if you decide to put like a pair of headphones or a headset and plug it in up here. So I think it's now time to do the most exciting bit, which is of course to install our 4080 Super. I've used this case before, as you can tell, but otherwise just remove the slot covers from 2 and 3, maybe 2, 3 and 4, depending on the card that you're going for. But then this should just line up with this slot here. Give it a good push. No, I didn't click. That's really not very satisfying. I'm gonna try that again. I want the click. It's because this is one of those clever motherboards that has a quick release here, which is actually ideal for this particular scenario, because usually you'd have to get your finger in here to press the release, and when you've got a big cooler, you basically have to take that off. Whereas with this motherboard, you can just press this button and then take the whole thing out. But because they put that button in, you don't get the same satisfying click.
You just can't win these days.
Either way though, just secure this down into place. Then we can grab our case and do a little rotate. Go to our floor and pick up our power supply. This is one from NZXT. This is the C1000 Gold, and you could go for an 850, that would be perfectly fine. Again, if you're going for this sort of level, 1000 watts gives you loads of headroom and means if you want to upgrade later to like a big i9 or something, and you want to go for, I don't know, an RTX 5090 if that ever comes out. And while it definitely isn't always the case, you might also find that if you have a higher wattage power supply, then the efficiency curve means that your power supply is actually more efficient in the range that you're going to use it, aka gaming, maybe using like 450 watts for your whole system. It might be more efficient on the 1000 than the 850, but obviously it varies depending on the SKU that you're going for, the brand, and how much power you're actually going to be consuming on your gaming PC. And fan facing downwards, gently slide this into position. Where possible, you always want to route your cables as you go, so the CPU is going to come up here and feed round, so we want to tuck these into these little cable tidies. And of course, sadly, because this doesn't have a native Gen 5 connection on the power supply, we will need this little adapter. It's not the end of the world, but you could consider getting a power supply that has one of these cables straight out the box. Then I think it's just a couple of cables to plug in and we're done. So we've got this very large ATX connection that you simply can't miss. Sometimes you need to give it a little bit more bulk so you can connect it, and then you can tidy it up after. At the top here, we also have these 8-pin CPUs. And to be fair, I think you only need to use one because we're not going to be using enough power to actually take full advantage of both. But if you've got the connections, you may as well plug them in. I mean, I've got tiny little hands, but if you've got big, chunky fingers, you will struggle a little bit here, I'll be honest. And then last, but certainly not least, you're going to need your Gen 5 connection for your 4080 Super. Just give that a push until it's all the way in, and then give it a bit more of a push. You want to make sure it is 100% in. And then I think we are done. How long was that? 1 hour, 11 minutes, even whilst filming. That goes to show just how simple building a gaming PC can be, especially if you go down the air-cooled route, because there wasn't really anything overly complicated here. I mean, turning this round to the back, you can see that without any cable management work at all, other than putting these cables down here, there's very little to do. I mean, the straps are all in the right places. We have them. I like that you can sort of do this channel down here. And because you have the hard drive cages and these little gaps, it's very easy to sort of stuff and stow any cables that you need as well. You've also got like room here for extra SSDs, but if you were going for different fans where you had the controllers, obviously you could put those there as well. You just take that off, and then you've got a decent amount of thickness to put any controllers and things in. So I'd say pretty good, but if it doesn't work, it's a win for nothing. Oh, that's not what I'm supposed to do. Why do PCs sometimes do this? It makes no sense. All I did was plug in the cable and it turned itself on. So at least we know it kind of works, but we don't know whether there's actually a signal yet. Because there's no monitor. I mean, there is now, but I say too little too late. Oh God, ow, what the hell happened there? Screwdriver, chaos, cut myself. Too late. Oh God, ow, what the hell happened there? Do I still have time to promote the PC-Centric mouse mat available at pccentric.store? Just hit the link down below. Well, I mean, I suppose this is almost like quite a real-world test, isn't it? Because I think this probably will happen to people, which is where you haven't got your monitor plugged in, and then you'll find that you've got nothing on screen and you think your system doesn't work. This usually just happens because your graphics card hasn't sort of initiated properly, and the solution is actually just to turn it off and turn it back on again. Obviously making sure that this time you do have a monitor plugged in and properly connected, and then hopefully you'll be greeted with a splash screen. Just like this! That's what I call a splash screen. That should be the name of my new album. Let's press F1 to get into the BIOS. We'll enable our Expo profile. We'll go over to QFan control. You can use the silent profile, but I find it doesn't actually work as well with AMD CPUs as it does with Intel. So I'm going to make my own. We'll then save and exit. But I really love the look of this system. I mean, I think not everyone's gonna like the silver accent that you've got on that graphics card, but other than that, it's just, everything ties in so nicely. It's a really nice, seamless design. There's loads of airflow here. You're gonna get fantastic temperatures on both that graphics card and the CPU. And I'd argue that you've got something that's really tasteful, really timeless. And no matter the upgrade that you want to make, I think you're gonna be really happy with this. I mean, let me know down in the comment section below. Am I right about this? Or maybe this is just a bit plain and boring. I mean, what do you guys think? Do you like this? Or would you rather have something else? It should be noted as well that if you are following along at home, you will of course need a copy of Windows that you download from the Microsoft website, and then you sort of run the installer. You've got a USB stick that then has it on. Just put this in the back of your system, restart it, follow the on-screen instructions, log in with your Microsoft account, and then you're all set up and ready to go. But to be fair, we are not currently set up and ready to go. Maybe the overclock was too much. We've got white light though. White is usually good. And yet. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to say we have solved it. It was actually really simple. As suspected, we just needed to update the motherboard BIOS file. So just go to your manufacturer's website, find the BIOS, put it on the computer, obviously let it do its thing, don't turn off the system, and as soon as I've done that and re-enable the Expo profile, everything works. So it does indeed seem like we are all set up and ready to go. We'll grab our side panel though and plop this on the side so we can do some thermal testing as we're playing our games. And the first game that's in our test is this, some Call of Duty Warzone. This is running at 4K with DLSS set to quality. We're currently running the Extreme preset, so as always, I know a lot of people say you will probably want to turn the settings down and have more multiplayer orientated settings, but at the end of the day, if you're spending this much money on a system, you probably want to know how it can perform if you turn everything up. And I mean, it's doing a very good job because, as I say, this is 4K DLSS with DLSS set to quality, no less, and we're still able to get 150 FPS, so that is no mean feat whatsoever. And I would also like to take this opportunity to draw your attention to the top right-hand corner of your screen, and we're looking for signs of CPU bottlenecking, but I think that they have actually updated Warzone, and it does seem to be a lot more efficient on the CPU, which it never used to be. It used to be pretty much the most demanding game possible when it comes to the processor, but these days it tends to be a little bit different, and we're currently getting around about 99% utilization on that GPU, so we're not seeing any CPU bottlenecking. But let's turn the settings down a bit, shall we? We go to 1440p, and we will also turn DLSS down to balanced. And as you can already see, there is a huge difference when it comes to the frame rate. We're now getting around about 240 FPS. I think we are starting to get into the realms now of bottlenecking, but I mean barely. I mean, at the moment, it's still around about 96, 99% on that GPU, but we do see it drop ever so slightly every now and then to around about like the high 80s, low 90s or so. So you're probably going to get a slightly smoother experience if you had an even better CPU, but I mean, at the moment it doesn't exist, and to be honest, even if it did, it wouldn't be worth spending any more money, because I think a lot of people still want that DLSS set to the quality setting just so you can get ever so slightly better image quality. But yeah, this is clearly a fantastic way to play Call of Duty, and if this is your game, I think you're going to love this system. But anyway, let's press on to our next and probably most demanding title, some Cyberpunk 2077. Oh, and that frame rate, I tell you what, that is super. That is superb. What is that all about? 14 frames a second. I think we've got a bug. See if we can fix it. Yes, I think we've done it. So what you're now seeing here, working properly, is DLSS set to performance. We've got this running at 4K Ray Tracing Ultra, and this is a fantastic way to play the game. I mean, I would say actually that games vary quite a lot, the DLSS quality setting. What I mean by that is that for some reason in Warzone, if you have it set to like performance, you can notice quite a big difference. Whereas in something like Cyberpunk, you'll find that actually performance and balance look very similar on a 4K display. It's not always the case if you're like playing at 1080 or 1440p, it's definitely more noticeable, but yeah, here I actually would actively choose to play DLSS at performance, and you're getting really nice, smooth, have your cake and eat it performance here, really. And I will also say that we don't have DLSS frame gen enabled yet, which is of course one of the new features. Not saying feature, because personally, especially in Cyberpunk, I think it's really good. But obviously it's been out for around about a year or so now. But it's still worth using, so we'll turn this setting on, and let's have a look then what that does to our frame rate. So it should have increased from 70, and it has, to around about 100 FPS actually. Don't forget that obviously the frame rate will vary depending on where you are in the game. When we're out in the sticks, obviously it's going to be higher than in the city. But yeah, this is a great way to play the game actually. I mean, the latency is I would say on the max end of the limit really of what I would deem to be acceptable. That's not to say it's not good. That's like anything over 60 milliseconds, I'd say you start to feel a bit more like you're steering your character. But yeah, if you wanted to tweak the settings a little bit more, you could. But to be honest, I think around about 50 milliseconds is probably what you should be aiming for. So yeah, this is a great way to play, but we can of course also turn on the even higher levels of ray tracing. We go all the way over to ray tracing, and then we find this path tracing, and we turn this on, hit enable, and this is pretty much the difference really between the 4080 and the 4090. If you do want to play it on a 4K display, then this is kinda at the higher end of the limit, really. I mean, the problem is that the latency does now go over that 60 millisecond mark, so I wouldn't really say, well, I don't know, I was gonna say it's not really worth using. It's definitely worth experimenting with, but I might want to turn a couple of the other settings down just to bring it nearer that 50 millisecond mark. But actually, I must admit, I'm quite surprised, because I was going to say this is 4090 territory, but not for the 4080. But yeah, it's only just above the latency. So I'd say for roaming around, this is absolutely perfect. But for actually playing, you're probably going to want to turn the ray tracing back down to like high or something like that, really, if you sort of care about how smooth everything feels. But obviously, it looks great because we're running this at 70 frames a second or so. Just be a little bit careful on that latency, I'd say. But let's move away from NVIDIA's poster child game to AMD's, as this is some Starfield. This is currently running at similar settings, I suppose. We don't actually have ray tracing here, but we do have some very, very detailed textures, models, and a game that I think looks absolutely stunning. And we're currently getting this set to 4K DLSS performance, and we're currently getting around about 100 frames a second or so, which is very good. But I mean, I don't know whether this is like an optimization thing, but I don't know. There seems to be always a lot more going on in Cyberpunk. It maybe uses the hardware a little bit more effectively, shall we say, bearing in mind that was doing all of the ray tracing behind the scenes. But at the end of the day, you just want to play a game that you enjoy, and you want a really nice frame rate and loads of detail settings, and that is exactly what you're getting here. It is a stunning game, and as you can see from our latency, this is currently sitting around about 29 milliseconds or so. So this looks great, feels fantastic, and there is a little bit more headroom in hand as well. I mean, in fact, let's change the DLSS to balanced. I don't think quality is necessary at 4K, but then let's turn the frame generation feature on, head back over, and then we'll see what that has done. And as you can see, the latency has increased. We're now around about 42 to 50 milliseconds or so. I don't again really think that particularly matters for a single player game. You're not really going to notice a huge difference there, but the frame rate has now increased. So if you do have a 120 Hertz display like we're using here, then you're able to sort of have your cake and eat it. And I think you can notice actually that the game is slightly sharper now. But as we said before, the difference between performance and balance at 4K isn't huge, isn't gigantic. But yeah, it's nice to have the flexibility. Clearly, your 4K gaming PC works at 4K. But jumping back over to our NVIDIA titles, and one that I am actually, well, actively playing at the moment, we have some Ratchet and Clank, and this is set to ultra settings across the board, including ray tracing. We've got this on very high, and as you can see, this is easily able to play this game, even at the max settings. 4K DLSS is once again set to performance, and we're getting about 105 frames a second or so. There is also some frame gen, so if you do want to sort of tweak the settings a little bit, then you probably can change the DLSS up to like maybe balanced or quality, depending on your preferences. But then in order to get the same level of frame rate, you'd have to turn on that frame generation. So personally, I'd rather have the slightly lower resolution that was pretty much imperceivable, but then not have the frame gen enabled. But I know everyone is different, so have a tweak, get it how you want it, and I think either way you'll be able to enjoy a very responsive and very good looking game to boot. But anyway, with that, I think that's enough talk, and it is time to end this video. Overall, I wouldn't say the 4080 Super is bad, but I wouldn't say it's like the best thing since sliced bread either. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a matter of perspective. If you are expecting something that is completely different, like the next generation of NVIDIA graphics cards, you're going to be disappointed. They're at least being very transparent. This is a refresh. That is what it is. So if you've already got a 40 series card, you probably don't need a 4080 Super. But realistically, in my opinion, I think this is just the fix to the card that should have been in the first place. I think the price point is probably about right now. VRAM on this isn't crazy, but it should be enough really for most people and for the foreseeable future. 4K gaming on this, even with ray tracing, is excellent. And as I say, at that price point of around about $999, I'd say this is about right. As for the rig that we've built itself, well, I know this isn't going to be to everybody's taste. Some people want a little bit more RGB bling, but that's absolutely fine. I think it's just nice to do something a little bit different from time to time, and I really do think that the cooler works with this aesthetic. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Let us know what you make of the rig, the case, the GPUs. Are you going Team AMD, Team NVIDIA, Team ARC? Let us know down in the comment section below. Smash the like button if you've enjoyed this, get yourself subscribed, and of course, if you do want to check out current pricing on anything featured in this video, then as always, you can find our Newegg and Amazon links with our description links that you can find down below. And while you're down there, why not discover your next PC case with the NZXT H6 Flow? Available in black or white, in both RGB or solid flavors, you get everything you need to create your cleanest build yet. With 3 angled fans fitted as standard, USB Type-C and 360mm radiator support, as well as an easy-to-use cable management system. What's not to love? Grab yours today with the link down below. And thank you so much for watching this video. We'll catch you in the next one.